At the United Nations, developing nations are calling out the world's wealthiest countries for falling short on climate promises. Leaders from the island nations to African states warning that rising seas, droughts, deforestation are forcing communities to flee, and that the billions pledged in climate finance are nowhere near enough. From the Pacific to Africa, these countries are saying it is time for the richer countries, historically responsible for the most greenhouse gas emissions, to step up and fund the fight against climate change. Wealthy countries have struggled to keep up with their climate finance promises. Funding finally reached $100 billion a year, the amount agreed back in 2009, but only in 2022, 2 years late. Last year, at a UN climate summit, leaders pledged to provide $300 billion a year to developing countries by 2035. But many of those nations say that it's still nowhere near enough, and experts are estimating they will need at least $1 trillion a year by the end of the decade just to cope with the effects of climate change. And leaders say rich nations, the ones that historically caused the crisis, need to step up. Fiji's Prime Minister has put it rather bluntly, quoting, "Those who shoulder the blame must foot the bill." Climate change, in fact, is already forcing people to flee. Ghana's president told the assembly that many migrants are climate refugees, displaced as deserts spread and villages become unlivable. Somalia's president warning that his country is forced to make impossible financial trade-offs, limiting investments in resilience and development. Extreme droughts, floods, rising sea levels hitting livelihoods and displacing families, and around 10% of the developing nations' budgets going just to respond to climate change. But some countries are meeting their commitments. Germany, for instance, provided a record 11.8 billion euros in 2024, but leaders of small island nations like Tuvalu, Madagascar, are calling for funding to reach those who need it the most and with fewer obstacles. Even major emitters are under scrutiny. China saying it would cut emissions by 7 to 10% by 2035. A pledge that drew criticism from the EU, which called it far short of what's required. Palau's president, meanwhile, urging world leaders to see the crisis firsthand. I'm quoting, "If the world is serious about 1.5 degrees, come to our region, see what the Pacific is facing and be moved to act," quote unquote. For developing nations, you see, the message to wealthy countries is quite clear. Promises are not enough. Communities are already on the move. Livelihoods are already at risk, and time is clearly running out. Unless the rich nations actually step up and act decisively, the human and environmental cost of climate change will only get worse, and it may be the smaller developing nations that will be forced to pay the price for these broken promises. To stay up to speed with the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.